What's happening, people? My name's DJ Graish, and today I'm going to be showing you how I make a liquid drum and bass tune from start to finish. So, without further ado, let's hop into Ableton and get going. So there are various different ways you can start a drum and bass tune. Sometimes I start off with the drums. Other times I do some chords. I might play the keyboard. In this case, we are going to be starting with a sample, which I found on Instagram. This is the sample that we're going to be using today. As you can hear, there's some soulful singing in there. We've also got this piano part. So we're going to put our project tempo up to 174, which is a very typical drum and bass tempo. And then let's have a listen to the sample. So there is where it sort of starts the loop. And I'm going to put on the metronome just so that we can hear the sort of tempo of the project, and then we need to match up this sample to that. As you can hear, the sample's going much slower than the metronome there. So what we're going to do is turn on warp mode. We've already got the first beat lined up, and then we just need to line up the second beat, which is probably going to be quite easy, to be honest. So about there. I mean, it's acceptable. If you right click on that audio clip now and go to convert harmony to new MIDI track, it'll do this. So there's a MIDI track with some MIDI information, and it probably sounds like So if it sounds like why we're using it, well, basically what I want to do is clean this up, and it should sound good after. First of all, I'm going to choose a better piano. So the one I like to use is, if I go to plugins, native instruments, I like to use Contact, and there's a piano in there called the Gentleman. Use a basic Gentleman just to get started. So these notes, the reason why you can't hear those first notes is because they start before beat one. So if you ever have some MIDI at the beginning of a phrase that you just can't hear, all you need to do is move it slightly to the right so it sits on beat one or after, and then you'll actually hear it. I think that sounds pretty good now. I'm just going to zoom in a bit on the MIDI notes here and literally just move this up to somewhere a bit more appropriate. I just moved it up by sort of 4 semitones, and now it's on F. Let's have a listen to how it sounds. I am going to add a sub-bass layer just so that we can sort of hear how those notes are sounding and if it's appropriate for the tune. So I'm just typing in basic into the search here. I'm going to go to instrument rack, bass, and basic sine sub sine. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take those low notes from the bottom of the piano clip and Command and X to cut them, and then going to make a new MIDI clip by highlighting this area. Command Shift and M to make a new MIDI clip. Command and V to paste that MIDI in the correct place. And obviously need to put that to the right octave by holding down Shift and down. As you can hear, it's now subby. What I was saying before about the F, we're actually talking about F0. So let me put it down one more time. So I think now is a good time for me to talk about the spectrum analyzer and how important it is to be having a look at the different frequencies of your different elements in the tune. So we have added a sub, and I've just taken off the distortion and everything, so it's the pure sub. You're probably going to need some headphones or decent speakers to even be able to hear what I'm doing now. But as I was saying before, there is a sweet spot of the sub. You don't want it too low that people can't even play it on, even if they've got a decent hi-fi system or car stereo. And you don't want it too high because then it's not going to have that sub-bass power. So in my experience, the sweet spot is like between kind of 40 and 90 hertz. Probably even narrower than that. So between like 45 and 70 or something like that. So the best way to check this, what I like to do is get the spectrum in Ableton, which is a spectrum analyzer, and put that on the master. Now, why do I put it on the master instead of on the sub-bass layer itself? Well, the idea is that if it's on the master, you can check the frequency of any sound in your project just by soloing that sound. So I've soloed the sub. Now we can go into the spectrum analyzer, and if you click this little arrow, it will make it sort of full screen. So you can really dive in and see in more detail what frequency things are. So let's play our sub again. So the first note is hitting up to about 44 hertz. So that is like weighty, and it's not too low. So this is why, I mean, I didn't invent this. Everyone does it. People love to make DNB tunes with the sub bass hitting at F0, F sharp, or whatever, you know, G. So that's sort of the sweet spot. So we've got our first note hitting at 44 hertz. Let's check the rest of them. So the next one comes up boo around C. That's like 66. So it's still within the sweet spot, but it's kind of the higher end of it. So at the beginning of the video, I was talking about the order I do things in, and this is kind of bizarre, but what I like to do is just get sort of a skeleton of the melody of the tune, you know. So we've got some basic chords. It's more of a guide, you know. We've got the chords there as the guide. We've got the sub bass there as the guide, so you sort of know where things are going to be in terms of timing and in terms of pitch. So now I think it's a good time to make the drums, and then we'll come back to, you know, these chords, making a melody, making the bass more interesting, etc., etc. So when it comes to drums, I've just been using audio channels recently. So there has been times in the past where I used the drum rack in Ableton or different simplers on different channels, but right now just using audio. So let's hop back into Ableton and have a look at the drum setup. So I've got a sample pack here from some guys called Jekyll and Hyde. So big up Jekyll and Hyde. Thank you for the free samples. And let's have a listen to some snares. All right, so I'm going to go with snare 5. And we're just going to put that onto 2 and 4 of each beat. All right, so shorten that down a bit. Maybe put a little bit of a fade at the end of it. And I'm also going to turn this right down because, as you can see, like many sample pack makers, they have absolutely boosted the crap out of this so that it's totally squared off, which is kind of appropriate for the genre, but I don't want to distort the hell out of this tutorial. So let me just put one on the 2, and then if you hold down Alt and drag the sample to another position, it'll sort of drag it and copy it at the same time. So here's that snare. All right, let's go into the kicks. I like kick 3. Let's have a listen to this. Nice. Now, everybody knows when it comes to drum and bass and jungle, you need to use breakbeats. Well, it's not 100% compulsory, but I will be using a breakbeat in this tune. So let's go back into Ableton, have a look at some breaks. And obviously there's various different ways to use the break. You can use it so it's just like going the whole time, or you can slice out some parts of it and just use the little shuffles if you want to. So I reckon the hot pants break is probably a good one to use because I've used it before and I kind of know what I'm doing with it. So as I was saying before, sometimes I like to use the whole break, including the kick and the snare. In this case, I think I'm just using the shuffle. So let me just... So what I'm doing here is, by the way, I'm holding command while I drag it, so it's not snapping to the grid, it's just snapping, it's not snapping to anything. So you can just leave it where you want. So click at the end of the clip, hold command, and then sort of drag sideways and just let go wherever you think is right. So let's have a listen to that. Still not right, obviously. Actually, I think probably that first little hit of it doesn't need to be there. So now we've got the shuffle exactly, not exactly, but it's sounding good. It's sounding in the right place. I think we're going to need some hats. And actually, I'm going to go back on myself because before I did say that I'm just using audio these days. But when it comes to these hi-hats, I think what I'm going to do is I am going to go into instruments and I'm going to just get a drum rack and put that into the project. Then I'm going to go back to the hi-hats and forget about hats 1 because that's a loop. Don't want that. But hat 2 is like an open hat. Hat 3, that's the one that, like, I'm going to show you in a minute, but basically we're going to have a pattern running of these hi-hats. And that hat 3, because it's more of like an aggressive hit, that's going to be the one that sort of goes with the snare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sort of pattern that goes... The thing is, we've got our break, and probably since these hats are all like on grid, they're probably not lining up directly with the hits of the break. So what you can do is this, look, if you zoom in on the audio of the break and the hats at the same time, you can see that that break's coming way later, and that is basically what creates the swing or the groove of the break, right? So that's something that is basically, it's going to sound robotic if the hats are on the grid like they are now. So the great thing is we've got like a double view here where the hot pants break is and where the MIDI clip is. We can see it, but we can also see inside the MIDI clip. So if I hold down command and just move that note to the right, you can basically line it up. Next one, hat 4. Again, move it to the right. Hold down command. Oops. Hold down command, and then it'll sort of take off that grid snapping, and you can move it to wherever you want. So if I get that bit of break there, paste that, and it goes, and then as you can see, just need to go back into the MIDI of these notes, these hi-hats, and move that one in line with the shuffle, and the hat 4 in line with the shuffle. Let's play it all together. I think maybe I'll have half as many rides and just delete every other one like this. So it's gonna go ding, ding, ding. And I'm going to add a high pass filter to that ride and get rid of a lot of the low end of it, just like I did with the hats. So here it is all together. So the next thing I want to do is basically create some more melodic elements for this tune. So far we've just got the sub bass and some piano, but I want to create a pad. So what I'm going to do is just going to use this wavetable synth that comes with modern Ableton Live, and it's an amazing synth. It's got a lot of different features that I used to have to use different synth VSTs for. But if you can make things in Ableton stock plugins, then why not? So again, Shift, Command, and M to make a MIDI clip. And we were working in a sort of key of F. So let me just find a good F. So it could be this one. Stretch these out. We're just putting in the basic notes, and then I'm going to start to build the pad after that, all right? All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is where it says basics here, I'm going to go to vintage and choose one called, where is it? Mini Wave, all right? And here, I don't know if you've seen this wavetable synth before, but just look at this. As you move this slider up and down, it goes through various different shapes. So in order to make that sort of automate and modulate by itself, what we need is the LFO. So if we go into this matrix here, we've got all these different factors or different controls, and then the different LFOs that can control those. So OSC1 position is that slider that I was talking about before that moves this up and down. So if we go onto the matrix, choose OSC1 position with LFO1 and drag that up a bit. Now that means that LFO1 is going to be the one that moves that. So now watch what happens. It's wobbling it. All right, now I'm going to want a filter on this, and I want to also put that filter onto an LFO. So going back to the matrix, and we've got down here, we've got all the different controls, and we've got the filter frequency. Now it's very clever how whenever you touch a different control, it just appears here because Ableton knows that you're going to want to modulate it. One thing that's going to make this sound a lot better, if you go over to here on the right where it says unison and it says none, you can put this to classic and then 3 voices. Instantly, it's sounding more like a pad because you've got 3 voices all making the same sound but slightly different. Let's see how this is working with the piano and the sub bass now. And with the drums, so you can see slowly, bit by bit, we are starting to have a tune. Another thing that I want to do is, if we go into production, jungle breaks, we've got the classic think break. Now I'm going to do this as quickly as I can, but this is basically the sample in its raw form, so I'm going to need to actually cut out the bits we need. So Command and E to cut that out, delete the first and the last part. Now let me open up my drums section, put this think break next to the other break, because I think it's pretty important for us to have these hits lining up so it doesn't just sound like an absolute mess. And as you can see, they are basically not far off already. So just line up the start there, slice this bit off at the end, play the drums all together. And just like that, the think break has been added to the tune. So let's hear it all together. Now, I'm going to hit save there, and then I think it's time for us to make another instrument. So let's take the piano and click the channel and duplicate it. So now we've got another piano. We just go into it, and where it's contact, click on the little spanner, aka wrench for the American crew, and go into library, and instead I'm going to use the Scarby Mark 1, which is a Rhodes piano. Double click on the Rode, and let's hear this. So let's have a listen to how that would sound 1 octave down. So I'm holding shift and pressing down. So just to recap, I went into it, I pressed Command and A to select all of the notes, then shift and down on the arrows. So let's hear how it sounds down here. Maybe this note here could be extended a bit longer, like that. And I'm guilty of listening to things in solo, but really I should be telling you that it doesn't really matter how it sounds by itself. It matters how it sounds with the piano, with this wavetable pad that we made. You know, how do they all sound together? It sounds like this. I'm just going to quickly rename that. So click the channel, Command and R, and then Rhodes. Just to differentiate. And you know, you can get tech, you can give them all different colors, but they might not necessarily all be playing at the same time, but it's a good idea to make sure they work with each other, and then you can choose to have them playing at the same time or by themselves. All right, so here's how everything sounds together. All right, so I found myself a saxophone. It's kind of a sad sounding sax, and I've put that into the Simpler and just played it at the appropriate pitch, and I'll show you that now. Let me just solo the sax, and this is what it's sounding like. So we've got the main note, which is playing, just playing through the Simpler, and then I've just added the end note again, but I've put a load of delay on it so that it goes like this. And that's a ping pong delay, which goes, you know, so if you click on this little ping pong button here, that basically allows the delay to go left, right, left, right, left, right in a ping pong style. So here's how the two elements of the sax sound together. And if I drag that into our instrument group, what's amazing is that the two channels of the sax are a group themselves, but in the later versions of Ableton Live, they've allowed you to put groups within groups, which is something that is mind-blowing. So now we've got the sax subgroup within the instruments group. And if I play that along with the piano, the Rhodes, and the pad, then they all sound like this together. And then adding in the drums and bass. So one thing that I used to be guilty of, and probably still am guilty of, is just having these sub-bass notes that just go do, and there's no movement to them. They're just this note going on and on and on. So in your average synth, like a soft synth, you usually have an LFO section. So this basic sine sub patch that I've used doesn't have an LFO section. But one thing you can do is just grab the auto filter in Ableton, put that after it on a sort of a low pass filter, put it somewhere like that so it's rolling off at like 500 hertz, something like that. And then if we get this little button here, which is syncing it to the project, and you can have like what, a 16th or an 8th or a 24th, and you can put this up to maybe I'm going to choose like 3/16ths, and then with the amount knob, that's like choosing how much it's going to wobble. So let's hear how it's sounding with 3/16ths. All right, so I think that's a good timing, but obviously it's wobbling way too much. So I'm going to turn the amount down, so it's just affecting it a little bit. And let's hear how that sounds with the rest. Turn up the distortion a little bit on this bass and the overtone. It's probably a good time for me now to talk about sidechain compression and making the kick duck the bass every time the kick hits, right? So for this, we're going to need the compressor. There's various different ways you can do this, and people like to do different experimental ways, but I'm going to show you the simplest and the first way that I learned. So you get your dynamics, go to your compressor, and just drag that onto the bass group. And then open this little arrow here, and then click sidechain and choose the kick. Now, you're going to see in the little graphic that it's actually not showing us the bass here anymore. It's just showing us those kicks. And you can sort of bring your threshold down to an appropriate level so that each time that kick happens, it's going to duck the bass. And here we have the attack and the release, which are very important, especially when it comes to sidechain. It's pretty important to have these quite quick, because what you want it to do is, like, as soon as that kick has finished, it's going to open it back up and let us hear the bass. So quick, in fact, that it's kind of psychological and you don't realize the bass has even been ducked. So here's how it's sounding with the sidechain compressor, ducking that bass down every time the kick happens. And if we go on to this other view here, it'll show you the GR, or gain reduction. But right now, it's just ducking it by 3 dB each time. And let me know in the comments how much you like to duck your bass down. So you might remember at the beginning of this video, we were using a sample, which I said I got from Instagram. Something that I forgot at the time is that you can it actually brings up the video, because this is a screen recording from my phone, right? And if I drag the video into Ableton Live, it actually comes up with this little window, which last time it was on my other screen, so you couldn't see it. But this little window here shows you the video, and this is the screen recording from my phone. So the Instagram account is called hang on. There we go. So the Instagram account is called prod.lodoni, and he says, who y'all here on this one? It's always the same. And he says, in the video, it's got sample this, and it tells you the BPM. Now, he said, in the comments, someone was asking, where did you get all these samples from? And he said him and his mate make these samples. So when he says make, I'm not sure if he means recorded it from an old school vinyl, or if he and his mate literally sing and play old school soul music in a 70s style and then just put snippets onto Instagram for people to use. But whichever way it is, big up Prod Lonnie, because he's a legend, and, you know, obviously this is just for the purposes of a tutorial. So it was a great little starting point for this tune. So this is what the sample sounds like. as you probably remember, this tune, I was telling you at the beginning of the video that it's good to use a certain pitch because it's going to mean our sub bass is in that low F and it's going to rumble properly. So I think I moved it up by 4 semitones. So let's have a listen. Again, that time stretching algorithm is currently on beats, so I'm going to choose complex. Now let me play this along with the other elements like the piano and stuff and see if this is actually in the right key. So that's all we've got time for today. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video. In part 2 of this series, I am going to be showing you how I do the arrangement, including making an intro and a drop. We're also going to be doing the mix down and a little self-master and getting this tune finished. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next video.